The Torah reading is called Ekev, which means heel in Hebrew. By the way, regarding my back recovery, it's the only thing I'm working on is a bit of a flat foot, and so she has me walking on my heels as much as possible. Supposedly that's supposed to help me, and it seems that it does. But Ekev also means consequentially of. La'akov means to follow somebody. So the idea is if you indeed follow diligently the things I'm telling you, the follow is guaranteed to happen. Uh, Now we call that the Deuteronomic theology. You've heard this before. The Deuteronomic theology is there are things I will ask of you uh, in the spiritual plane. If you do them, then good things will happen to you with your animals, with your agricultural, and so forth. It was extended to mean that God would protect the people of Israel in the land of Israel and Jerusalem, especially. And then, of course, we have the destruction in 586 and 70. And this whole idea of the Deuteronomic theology um, began to fall apart. In fact, one reason the Kabbalah came into being was to provide a new alternative theology. It doesn't say that anywhere, but when you look at when the Kabbalah came into being, soon after the catastrophe of the breaking up of the Jewish communities in Spain, they fled all over the Mediterranean. Many landed in Sfax, and within a generation, the mystics were writing poems. And as I was studying Zohar this week, and I'll share a bit of that with you, one of the themes was that the world has to be brought together. And part of that was the great aching for the great rabbinical sites of wisdom in Spain. Remember, the golden age of Spain was brought to a severe and sudden closure. Also, other unspeakable things happened during the Spanish Inquisition. So one way to see the Kabbalah is trying to set up an alternative theodicy other than if you people follow my commandments, then I will bless you and your land, which does not seem to be true. So the Kabbalists found their own way to articulate that. But of course, by the Holocaust, Second World War, Deuteronomic theology was over, completely over for any outside of any of those who simply had to believe it dogmatically. And I've had a few Orthodox rabbis say to me, I believe this dogmatically, meaning in order to be an Orthodox Jew, I have to believe this. Outside of that, this idea of Ekev, that if you do this, the following will happen. If you follow the Deuteronomic theology, I think it's in among non-Orthodox Jews, it's in great disrepute. People don't believe it anymore. So the reason is if they don't believe it anymore, why do people such as myself say it in the prayer book? In the second paragraph after the Shema, it says exactly this, V'haya im shamoa. If you indeed listen to my commandments, all these following things would happen. It's one of the first things that Reform Judaism took out of the prayer book was the second prayer of the Shema, the prayer that said, V'haya im shamoa. If you indeed do these things, the following will happen. Now, I think one reason is I grew up in a conservative synagogue. I said it every Friday night and eventually on not a small number of Saturday mornings. I knew it. I flowed through it. And I thought about why I didn't want to let it go. And that was because of the imagery. All of the pastoral imagery of cows and sheep and fields. I just, when I read it, I just went into the imagery. And when it was challenged and it said, if we do not follow the commandments, all this is taken away from us. I thought, without much sophistication, well, it's an aspirational kind of a prayer, meaning if we keep saying the prayer, maybe it'll be true. And I think I like many, how should I say, not believing in the Deuteronomic theology. The liturgy was more important than my theology. In fact, that has become a theme of my life that I've explained to other people. People say to me, why would you say that if you don't believe it? And I say, I've given very little of the Siddur, the belief test. I don't look at one thing or after another and say, well, I say this because I believe it. Because for me, tefillah is about something far more than belief. And when people ask me to explain, I would say I see myself not as a believer, meaning propositional theology. I believe in a set of propositions about God, but rather as one who has the experience of the knowledge of God. I just heard a rabbi the other night. I think I mentioned I was on my way home um, from services. No, no, I went to a Kabbalat Shabbat at the local place, and it was completely confusing. They use a different siddur. The music was all different. I just sat there and said, "Okay, I'm on for the ride." And the young rabbi got up and gave an impassioned Dvar Torah that the point of tefillah was not getting things, but rather connecting with the divine, and not our sharing what we, not our sharing with the divine what we want, but knowing what the divine wants from us. It's the kind of Devar Torah that I would give, I think. Um, it was it's so interesting. Things that I already know coming from another person with such authenticity and such inner depth of meaning was a really profound to me. In fact, it stuck with me all week. So I know what good darshanut could do. I mean, I've had this theology since I was in high school. I forgot about Deuteronomic theology. It's more a Kabbalistic theology that the point of tefillah is to know God, and what God does or doesn't do, what we get or don't get, it's really have to do more with randomness on one hand or the Sitra Achra on the other. It's not a satisfying theology if you want things to go well for you and you're depending on God to do it for you. This is not a satisfying theology. Is it? It is a satisfying theology if your soul is at the center of the theology and the most important part of your inner life is the breakage of the soul and inner loneliness, which, for example, I think drive Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav was a great inner brokenness and a great inner loneliness. So he didn't apparently care about how much he had. He simply wanted the divine to help heal his inner brokenness, and therefore maybe that as a step toward healing divine brokenness and to overcome his existential sense of loneliness. So there's only so much that another human being can provide. And it's interesting. One thing I've learned as I've gathered a few study partners here, which I can't say we're friends with, we don't socialize or anything, but to share these ideas over a text bonds one deeply with another human being. And for two people to talk sincerely about Galut HaShechina, that the Shekhinah is in exile. And one reason the Shekhinah is in exile is so that we, some of us, can acutely feel the Shekhinah in exile and to make our miserable hearts a home for her as a way station, and then bring her back into the world of the Sfirot and link her into her proper place. In another way of saying it, we are here to help the Shekhinah overcome her exile. So we're down in the world of brokenness, waiting to catch her and take her back up. Now, in the same page on the Zohar, it gives a very different impression that she comes down here to feed us. She knows that we're alone and desolate, and she goes down into the mountain of darkness and fights snakes, and she gathers food together and comes out of the mountain of darkness. And just at dawn, she comes to the world and spreads spiritual victuals to all those who are studying Torah. Uh, Now, you do have to show up for dinner, meaning you have to show up to the study table. But if you show up to the study table at dawn, the spiritual food is present. My study partner and I agreed it's a very bizarre text that is impossible to explicate completely. But just juxtaposing these two ideas of the Shekhinah, on one hand, she's in Galut and relies upon us. On the other hand, we're in Galut and she comes down to Galut to sustain us as long as we are studying, because studying is where the tuzuna, the nourishment from the divine comes through to us. So the first thing to say on Torah portion Ekev, I just I remember so vividly, when I got to rabbinical school and we were reading Richard Rubinstein's Faith After Auschwitz, and he didn't have to convince me. I was already beyond the idea that God was supposed to save the Jewish people at Auschwitz. Oh, by the way, why? Because what about everybody else? I mean, I said that to a few people. Are you saying to me that if 59 people perished during the Second World War and not 65, that all would be good? They said no. So it's not about the 6 million, right? And they go, yes. I said, okay, let's go with the bigger problem than that very problematic small problem. So the question is a problem of evil. So one thing I wanted to do tonight, a secondary thing, was share with you how I've addressed the problem of evil. Many people find it useful, other people don't understand it, and other people find it rather empty. So if maybe you'll understand it, appreciate it, and it'll do something for you. So here's my approach to the problems of evil. When people articulate the problem of evil as being, if there were God, there would be no evil. Since there is evil, there can be no God. It's a way of expressing a classic piece of logic that was came up from the Stoics, who were great masters of logic, and the Romans, which goes like this: if there were X, there wouldn't be B. Since there is B, there can't be X. You can play with that. If there is X, there wouldn't be B. Since there is X, there can't be B. If there were God, there wouldn't be evil. Since there is evil, there can't be God. Nearly every person who says that human evil is evidence for the non-existence of God uses this phrase. So here's what I did with it. If there is X, God, and we'll think of God as that which does the good, there wouldn't be B, evil. So I would say pause and define evil. Pause and define evil. Because if there is X, there can't be B. We ought to give some special attention to evil. So here's what I found when I asked people to define evil. There's one group who are moral relativists that said evil is a subjective evaluation of an individual person. So I said, does it really exist outside of people? They said, no, it's a subjective analysis. Things aren't really evil or good. It's how we subjectively think of them or experience them. So it's not ultimately real. They said, correct. It's not ultimately real. It's only real as a matter of perception. I've heard that before. So let's go back to our phrase. If there were God, people would not have perceptions of evil. I tried out that on for size. If there were God, people would not have perceptions of evil. That doesn't seem to be very strong to exclude the idea of God existing. And since people have perceptions of evil, there can't be God. Put even more strongly, if there were God, there wouldn't be words that apply to nothing, because the word evil does not actually apply to something real. It applies to states of mind. Um, so therefore, if there were evil, there wouldn't be empty concepts. And since there is God, and since there are empty concepts, there can't be God. The more I thought about it, that phrase, if there is X, there wouldn't be ways. It's called the modus tollens, Tollens, taught me that it is how shall I say it? Of any reason to refute, logically at least, the idea of the existence of God, that is the most weak, but it's the one that everybody uses. So I want to ask you, if someone says modus tollens, if there were God, there wouldn't be evil, ask them to define evil. Now, if they go all the way and say evil is a radical force of the bad, it's a force of evil, well, evil can only exist if there is a force of good. Even if the force of good is losing, it's still a force of good. So if they're saying, if there were a force of good, there would be no force of evil. Since there is a force of evil, there's no force of the good. Well, I would say for a force of evil that hasn't conquered, meaning an omnipotent evil, implies the good. Right? So if there is a strong evil, there would not be a force to the good, because that would make evil impotent. a third thing on that. By the way, when people talk about what do you have to give up to have a credible theology, it's interesting. You can look at a book by an article by Hans Jonas, Jonas, Hans Jonas, published 1987. I actually forget the name of it. I just reread it, where he says the idea of divine omnipotence. He says omnipotence is one of the worst ideas of theology because if God is omnipotent, therefore nothing can stand. I mean, if God's force, God's omnipresence is so powerful, nothing else exists. Nothing. So therefore, against what does God's power stand? If there is nothing else, the idea of power has no meaning because power only has meaning if there is resistance. So Hans Jonas says you have to give up the idea of divine omnipotence if you want any idea of God that passes the criterion of good human thinking. And that's what he writes at the end of the article. He says, if you want to believe in God, first of all, you have to believe there really is evil. And you have to stop believing in divine omnipotence because neither one makes any logical sense for people who like to think well. He says, this puts us into this kind of a world where there is God, there is a force for good, is pitted against some force for evil that we can further discuss. And this divine is not omnipotent enough to destroy it. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything but God, including us. So these are hard things because I read this in 1987, just as I had um, finished teaching Holocaust as the Memale Makom of the substitute for the Holocaust teacher who got ill. And in 1988, they asked me to fill in as the full-time professor. Well, luckily, I had just read that book, the article 1987. And I made it required reading. Not that I thought the undergraduates would read it, but at least they would have it if they kept their books from college. And I explained to it, just what I'm explaining to you. I've explained to it several times through where a few got it. The fact that there is evil, don't stop believing in God. Believe that the divine is in a struggle against evil, and the divine needs partners. And you can decide to sit this one out, like let God and evil work it out, or you can decide to take part of, Sat Hashem, the army of God. Now, where is the fight for evil going on? Where is the battle happening? Well, not on some battlefield across the country, not on the other side of a hill. It's right local. It's inside you. That's where the fight is happening. There's a fight between good and evil that is happening inside you. There are the forces of good and forces of evil in you vying for control, defining your identity. So we go back to Ekev. If you do these things, God will bless you. So now we're thinking about it purely spiritually. If you do what kinds of things might you enjoy some kind of divine blessing? What kinds of things would you have to do? Well, one of them in this point is stop sinning. Now, what we mean by sin, remember going back to our time with Paul Tillich, we don't mean the sins of religion. Remember, Paul Tillich believed in a religion beyond religion. There's something within us that while religion might call it a sin, you know that it's not, and religion um, might call it a sin, and you know that it's not, and might not call it a sin, and you know that it is. So yeah, there is some lack of authority here. I mean, you are the only one who knows yourself, and you might say the divine knows you, and you might do something where others will look askance on me, but either I'm permitted to do this to make my life go well, or I have to do this. So it's much more complex, I think, than a simple Orthodox role model. If there is indeed such a thing, I haven't spoken to all Orthodox Jews. That there's a very clear black and white lines about the problem of Ekev, what you should do and what you should not do in order to bring blessings. For example, the Hasidim say the worst sin is depression. That's what they say. The worst sin is depression. Because right after depression comes nihilism. Nothing means anything. There is no truth. It's just it's just a shill game. It's just a like Leonard said in his last song. It's a fixed game. No one's winning here. No one's coming out alive here. But notice what Leonard does in his last song. He does believe that he's up against an evil God. Well, what does it make Leonard? He knows he can see the God who's fixed the game. Leonard says, I'm coming after you. I'm coming after you. Once you discover the God that has fixed the game, are you with those that are coming after that Gnostic God, the God of darkness, the God of the mountain of darkness, and engaging in battle? Or do we give in? Now, I've known people who have given in. Um, the fight for good and evil in them is they just really don't care. It's too hard. So, of all the different things that we can think about with Ekev, of you know, if you do these things, the following will happen. For me, they mostly come down to spiritual commandments of fighting the Sitra Achra, the other side, in our own lives. For me, that is um, the meaning of Ekev. What commandments that do we do? And if we do them, it's likely that something will flourish. What's going to flourish? To some degree, our own souls. What's the worst sin? Depression, because depression wipes out meaning and is only a step away from nihilism. So therefore, what kinds of things ought spiritually depressed people do, if that has become my theme for tonight? Well, one certainly is, as much as you possibly can, find study partners. You have to find study partners where you can talk about these things, who they feel it as real as you feel it, where the darkness is palpable. Second thing, I think the study of beauty. I think the beauty that Shanti brings to us. I have my own texts that I study every week, and some of them, uh, the Zohar text I studied this week made me feel really bad. I mean, it went to a very dark place. Uh, um, it went to a very dark place, and what I do when I study Zohar, I try to see in my mind what the author was experiencing, because I believe the Zohar was written more meditatively and imagistically, that the author closed his or her mind, and they were especially talented, creative, and visual people. This is my opinion. I'm not, by the way, so I assume somebody is. Um, and they saw these wild images. They didn't edit them. They didn't say, okay, this is too wild to write down. So the person says to the study partners, Chavraya, this is what I'm seeing. And they don't understand it, but they know that it's real. They said, write it down, put it in the book. And maybe they shape it up, edit. Maybe they put some, somebody says, look, I don't write from visions. I write from my soul. And, because these were pamphlets. These were texts that communities put together. Um, but I'll prepare myself and read this to you next week. You're not you won't understand. It's not going to make any logical sense whatsoever. You will ask every question in the world to say, but that can't be true, and it negates itself, and this is wrong. I'll read it to you anyway. Um, but in the reading of it, I felt worse and worse. Right, Finley cries, right? I'm gonna try not to cry. Uh, so I walk out, and suddenly I had this overwhelming feeling that the Shekhinah had had rested upon me, the Shekhinah in Galut. Now, I've had mystical experiences. I'm not sure if this qualifies, but I was standing outside on a street in Tel Aviv, the hottest day of the year, and I stopped. People say, "Kol beseder?" I go, "Are you gonna faint?" So beseder. I didn't say that I was having an overwhelming experience of the Shekhinah. That I did not say to people. All I said was, "Ani beseder." And I felt the fullness, and no words, but I felt um, so something like, you're one of the students, you're one of the scholars, and you study to save me, to send me back to my home. And suddenly, my life made no difference. I'm only here to get her home. And it was a very deep, overwhelming experience. And that sense of this Torah portion, Ekev, if you do these things, Well, what I did was I found a study partner and I studied the text and we talked about real things and we studied about the Shekhinah and I walked out of the building and I walked out to the street and there she was as if she was saying, I heard you talking about me. Are you serious? Are you being honest? Because if so, then I experienced her. I experienced her sadness, the sadness of the exile, the sadness of what the exile represents, the sadness of the state of Israel right now. I just felt everything and I stood on Rothschild Street and I let it pass. And I took a big breath and I came home and I've been, dealing with that. Looking forward to tonight where I could actually verbalize it a little bit. This just happened yesterday. So on one thing, the way that we fight it is to take it seriously. Find study partners and study deep text. I would start with the poetry that Shanti brings us. It's very accessible. So much of it is easy to understand. There's some metaphors you got to crack, but once you get in there, they're transportive, they're transformational. And once your linguistic skills get better, you can maybe apply, come to some Kabbalistic text, which I will maybe devote a little bit of time to on Friday nights as we go. I've been really thinking about our Friday night gatherings together. One thing I think I want to do is I want to end each Friday night with a psalm, and I'll start that tonight. The last little thing I wanted to say is something I hear often is a person who says, like the like the complaining person in Ekev, I haven't done a lot of bad things, but something bad is happening to me, and it's not equal to the little bit of bad that I done. Um, okay, I lied to my insurance company, and now my business is falling because of that. I'm making that up, but it's pretty close. So I've been studying a Psalm 39, 7 in other quarters where it says, playing with the word Selim, which is used to mean image of God. But now that we realize the word Sel means shadow, and the M ending is an intensifier. So it says, Yit halech Betselem Yit halech ish. Uh, in shadowy darkness does a person walk around. It completely deconstructs the word B'Tselem in the image of God in Genesis 1, because when we find the other place that it's used in Psalms 39, it's a complete difference. Because Tselem, image of something, means shadow. A shadow is an image of something. The root of the word Tselem is stel, shadow, and the word Hevel are now parallel. Well, Hevel means emptiness, futility. It's a very, very dark psalm. And then and I should have it in front of me, but I don't. And then it says something like, "You work mi yitzbo." Who's going to accumulate? Yesh harbe litzbo mi yasef. Who's going to collect all the stuff that you leave behind? We spend so much time accumulating. Therefore, what? And I took it differently, and I thought to myself, based on our Torah portion, we spend our lives accumulating transgressions, micro transgressions, little nasty things, things where we haven't fully been up to the challenge of the good. So my sense was that you are walking in a shadow of darkness. You accumulate various degrees and kinds of sins and transgressions. Me, it's bore. Who's gonna gather them together? And then this is associative thinking. This is an example of associative thinking. Our Torah portion says, knock down all those idols. I thought, what if all of our transgressions, all of our sins, the stuff that just go, by the way, this is a Hasidic interpretation of Ekev is you walk right over the stuff you're supposed to pay attention. It's not a big mitzvah, it's a mitzvah ketana. Mitzvah gedolot, you say, oh, it's a mitzvah gedol, I'll walk around it. I won't to transgress it. Mitzvah ketana, it's just a mitzvah ketana. No, not a big deal. So it says Ekev. We tramp on small mitzvot. This is in the Sfat Emet. And so we trample on the small mitzvot. They don't go away. They collect. And they finally collect into a shape, into an idol. And so at the end of my kind of playful, not very well written Shabbat thought, Suddenly there's an idol in your backyard. And God says, what are you doing with an idol in your backyard? Say, I don't know. I don't believe in bad gods. I don't believe in idols. Like, I barely believe in you. I didn't make that. God says, actually, you did. Actually, you did make that. It's an accumulation of all the sins that you walked on that you didn't think made any difference. They don't go away. They accumulate. You are walking, B'Tselem Yithalech Ish, Psalms 39. You are walking around in your own shadow of darkness. And this now you have an idol in your backyard composed of all the little sins and transgressions that you thought made no difference because you trampled on them. This is the Hasidic Torah portion, meaning of Torah portion Ekev. And now that's there. Are you following me? Okay, what do you do with it? All right, what do you do with it? Well, here's one thing to do. Rosh Hashanah Eve, as I told you, I said about what we're doing at Orator Services depends on the number of people and the amount of support. So putting all that together, I think there's enough support for us to do one night of each of the high holidays. Um, Thank you for those who did support. You're probably all here. A lot of people didn't. So we thought we want to only perform as well as people are willing to support it. Okay, so Friday night, I'm sorry, Rosh Hashanah night, Monday night the 22nd. Um, bring your idol. You can put it in a wagon, right? You can help somebody carry it and just sit it down next to you. Like me and my idol. You're gonna come to services with your idol and say, yeah, I brought my idol. Okay. Maybe make a paper mache model. I don't know. And what we're going to do is we're going to take every little piece of that idol and turn it into fairy dust. Every piece of the idol is going to turn into a divine offering. Okay. We got to have it all together. So we who walk around in shadowy darkness, trampling on the small mitzvot, the things we're bidden by God to do that drives the Shekhinah further and further underground. Oh, by the way, in this piece of Zohar I was studying, it says, just as there is a har shel or, just as there is a mountain of light, yesh har shel choshech. So my teacher and I had an argument. Uh, she said they stand side by side. You know, each one has the plane here, and each, you know, the one har shel choshech and har shel or. I said, no, Harshal Hoshek is inverted. It's like the abyss. It's pointed downward. We see the base, but the tip of the mountain of darkness goes down. So when you fall into that plane of darkness, it looks like a pool. There's an abyss there, and it describes that every night the Shekhinah. Now that I have this inverted mountain metaphor in my head that I can't get rid of, she dives in there. She dives in there. And the reason she dives in there is because that's where the food is that she's going to feed to us. There's some incredible thing. I think I've shared too much of it not to read it next week, where the spiritual food we live on, she finds in the depths of the mountain of darkness. And by the time she brings them up, she has transformed them and she breaks out. And what does she find? All the people studying. And she says, I brought this for you. Okay. And that's our sustenance. It's an incredible piece of Zohar. It's not theological, doesn't stand for everything. It's just one story, but a story I can't get out of my head. So what I'm offering to you is, as with every year, for me, the high holidays are a great gift. Great gift meaning I would have never come up with it. I would never have come up with a day where you have Rosh Hashanah that every year I've been thinking, Malchut Shemayim, that's a good Devar Torah. I'm not away from that Devar Torah. But something else happened to me because I've been studying Zohar all year. It's um it's a day where we can dismantle sin. There's an instruction manual. You go online and you say, "What's the instruction manual for this?" I have a clock back here that I dropped now. I can't get it working again. So I went online for an instruction manual for this clock. Wow, I found the instruction. It's made in some little town in the hills of China, but they put up an instruction manual, not in good English, but in easily imitatable and laughable English. And I'm reading it, and I did this, and my clock works. I said, y'all put up a manual. You didn't have to do that. We Westerners would have never occurred to us. You decided to not put up a manual, and your manual worked. And my clock is working. So what if you need a manual for taking apart that mountain of sin, mountain of light, mountain of darkness, mountain of, well, not say mountain of sin, but a little form. I'll talk about the form of the sin next week because that's also a very deep thing. So Rosh Hashanah, for me, with the help of the Kabbalah, Chassidut, I have my own theory of Rosh Hashanah this year that I want to share with you. I'll be talking about it every Shabbos on the way. This will be our preparation for the high holidays. It's going to be not your usual one. It's going to be the one where I'm at because truly, folks, I have never studied Kabbalah with a teacher for an entire year. So I want to share that with you. It's been special. It's changed me. You know, guys that are 70 who've done a lot of learning, they typically don't change much. Well, it changed me. It changed me. Um, and then Yom Kippur, I don't know what Yom Kippur will be. But it will be in line with the constant work that I'm doing. It's gonna have some logical sense of this mountain of light, mountain of darkness, the pesel of our sins that we create by tromping on mitzvot katanot. It's all trying to work itself into a teaching in my head. I just wanted to offer part one of it tonight.